Hello, Sabina Brennan here, host of Superbrain, the podcast for everyone with a brain. It takes just 30 seconds on Google or Apple Pay to make a one-off donation to support this show. Simply follow the Support This Show link in the show or episode description. Cheers. Hello and welcome to Superbrain, the podcast for everyone with a brain. My name is Sabina Brennan and you are in for a treat because my guest today in this bumper episode is comedian, writer, actor, TV presenter and all-round lovely, lovely person, Alison Spittle. I met Alison very briefly a few years ago when we were both panellists on a radio show, but other than taking a selfie together in the lift after the show, we never really spoke until now. You are very welcome, Alison Spittle. It's kind of a little bit of a tongue twister, Alison Spittle. There's lots of S's in it.
It is, and I have a lisp, so I feel that it's very cruel to have a name with that many S's in it and a lisp. But thank God I don't get to say my name that often.
It's a fab name, actually.
Yeah, so the Spittle, I've Googled it. Spittle is according to Google, is an incredibly rare name. It's from Belgium originally. My granddad and granny when you retire and you do your hobbies, and they got into genealogy for a little while. So the Spittle name comes from Belgium. They're Huguenot. They fled Belgium a few centuries ago for religious persecution, ended up in the Midlands in Birmingham. And I've looked up the name. There are a few in Canada, a few in America. My family is the only Spittle family in Ireland. And also, it's worked out that most of the grandkids my granddad has are women. So the Spittle name will probably die out.
But hopefully they might hold on to their name as well, you know.
It's such a strange, and it's not that I'm being dismissive or anything like that, but do you know there's some things in life that you don't have to explain or you don't have to think about, and then you think about it and you're like, why is it this way? And taking your husband's name is a thing that it's not that I'm incredibly against it, and I don't judge people for taking their husband's name, but a part of me is like, why? You know?
Yeah. But I mean, it's not the same across all cultures. In some cultures, the husband takes the wife's name.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I should have to look. I should look into that. Yeah, I think I did actually. I think actually we did a piece about names at one point about this very topic. Actually, on the show where you and I met. I'm eventually getting to what would normally be at the top of the show where you and I first met, which was actually on News Talk on a panel. Here Come the Girls. It was called. It was lighthearted, but one of the days was actually about, how you feel about women taking men's names, etc., etc. So I did a tiny little bit of research. Research is too big a word. I Googled it. I remember discovering, that in different places and different cultures, there's different things happen. So it's not all that, everywhere it isn't as patriarchal as it seems. But actually, I was just saying to someone the other day, I was doing something and they asked me for my PPS number. And I used to know my PPS number off by heart, like from when I got it. I had it so long, I knew it off by heart. Then a couple of years ago, when I was getting, the public service card, and I went in to get the public service card. Basically, what happened was I had a PPS number, and then when I got married, they just took your PPS number off you and gave you your husband's with the W on the end of it, which was W. Yeah, so my PPS number ended with VW. No, I remember even thinking at the time that, Jesus, that's a bit much, like wife. I kind of went back to the day, you see, if you think about it, that the marriage bar, women weren't allowed to work. So it was probably just thought, well, what's the point in them having a PPS number? But then 2 years ago, they when I got my public service card, apparently the government felt, oh, this was a terrible thing to do to women. So we're going to give them back their own PPS number. So I've got this new PPS number. And I mean, the gesture is great, but I really don't want to be having to learn a new PPS number. So I actually have it stored in my phone somewhere because, the other one is the one that comes to mind. But there's so many mad things
I hear stories from my family and for people I meet, and the story about how it wasn't it was frowned upon that women drank pints in pubs, and that Nell McCafferty kind of organised a load of women to go to a pub and order a brandy and then order a pint. And if the barman would put the brandy down, and then when they refused to give the pint, the women would drink the brandy and then leave. And,
Right.
Isn't that's like...
it's not that long ago, because Alison, I mean, I remember really when women started to drink pints.
Yeah.
But it was considered, a glass, and we weren't allowed into bars. So there was
mad.
There was the lounges, and then there was a bar. So women weren't allowed to go into the bar. I don't know if that's still there in some places.
But they do still exist. If you see pubs, they do have lounges at the back and then bars at the front. So I do see like the architecture of that is still there. It's so strange. It's so strange, but it's so and it changed so quickly as well.
Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of changes that have happened across my lifespan. And I mean, I know, I suppose on paper I'm old, but I don't feel old. Do you know what I mean? And people talk about,
I'm writing a project at the moment about something based in the late 2000s, so like let's say 2007, 2009, because all about it's about basically two young teenagers trying to get the morning after pill. And I know I have relatives now, and we've talked about it, younger relatives, 18, 20, that kind of age. They've no idea how hard it was to get the morning after pill for like a rural teenager. And I'm so happy they don't know that. I'm so happy that they can just, that it wasn't seen as such a massive inconvenience.
Right. So that's the difference sort of between the rural and the, living in a city. Like, I mean, I grew up in Dublin. So like there was the Well Woman Centre was there, and going back quite a long time, the Well Woman Centre was there. For getting the pill or morning after pill or, all sorts of things. But I mean, at that point, you still couldn't get those kind of things from your GP, but at least the Well Woman Centre was there. But that wouldn't, as a rural, as you say, as a rural teenager. So I'm sorry, I was stalking you. I have to stalk all my guests.
You don't have to explain yourself for that. That sounds like you've done your due diligence and research.
Just when I meet people, or, if I'm, reading about people, I think it's just a human thing. I'm always looking for some connection, something we have in common. The things that I found in common with you actually are to do with places. So,
right.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting. So,
I don't know about you, but I love to research. Like, for instance, the place I live now, like this specific street, I've researched events that have happened on the street, the local pub, in the town. Since I moved to London, I go to this YouTube page called Londonist, and also this other guy called Jeff and Vicky. They go to every tube station in London, and they give little historical facts, and I love minute kind of domestic history. That's my favorite kind of thing to look up. They filmed like parts of Fawlty Towers here, and the Omen and stuff like that. So it's quite
Wow. Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I kind of like that. I like that sort of stuff, and that kind of really brings me nicely, because I've done that a little bit. I haven't done a whole genealogy thing, but have tried to kind of look back at relatives on both sides. But you moved around Ireland then and lived in a few different places, but Mullingar is one of the places you lived in.
Yeah, and a lot of my family are still based in Mullingar. Like, I made my communion in Mullingar, and like the main graveyard that kind of houses my dead relatives are in Mullingar. So, I'd find myself there a lot, and it's kind of the hub. But I think maybe the hub is where my grandparents live. So wherever they moved to, they're in Galway now at the moment.
Right.
So that would be one of the hubs, but kind of Mullingar is the
growing up, where you kind of did that growing up. So that's the connection. So my nana's from Mullingar.
Oh, lovely. Which part of Mullingar is she from?
Yeah, they were actually from the main street.
Oh.
Yeah. And also they had quite an unusual name, and it definitely wasn't an Irish name.
Yeah.
In fact, I think her father was English. And so their name was Cox.
Oh, wow. COX?
COX, yeah. Because I was going to ask you, did you get slagged about, Spittle, or was it something, was it a challenging name to have as a child, or did people make that connection?
Yeah, they did, but they went for the angle of it rhymes with Skittles, so they'd be like,
that's
the
good.
rainbow. Yeah, which I think was a fellatio joke that they were trying to work in. Yeah, it did. I mean, like, you'd have because it is basically stuff that hangs off the side of your mouth. But there's a few Flemings in my school as well, and I thought Fleming is just a more for me. At least spit is like the one bodily fluid, and Fleming is a combo.
Although we'll forget about the spelling, but the sound, yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. No, you have to hawk up the phlegm. Although, yeah. Anyway, we'll
And we won't even mention your grandmother's second name. Yeah.
I can't imagine that was easy, to be perfectly honest. Although, she died when I was relatively young, so probably long before I ever made any sort of connection like that. So I never asked her. You also spent some time in Moat.
Yes, the place that I lived the longest is a place called Ballymore. So I would have went to secondary school in Moat. That would have been the nearest town. So yeah, I did my secondary school years in Moat, and it was I loved that secondary school. They were, especially as an adult, I look back at it and I'm like, you kind of appreciate how good they were to me, because I could not have given less of a fiddlers about school at that point. Something clicked and I just didn't think school was worth my time. So I moved loads of times in primary school, just absolutely loads of times. And I was encouraged as a kid to be smart. My parents bought me books, and I was a book reading child, and that was my identity. And I would put my hand up all the time in primary school, and and that was my identity, was to be the clever clogs. And I suppose the place where I settled last, it's not that, it's so strange, because it's not as if people would have, I think people mildly ribbed me for being a clever clogs, and then when secondary school came up, I was like, well, I can be a different person here and not be clever. So that's what I did. I kind of leaned into that a lot.
Yeah.
I was just a loud kid that would wear like strange clothes, and also my way of fitting in was by not fitting in.
Yeah, different. Yeah, I mean, I think lots of teenagers do that. Yeah,
so I think I just opted out of everything, of kind of and so I wouldn't. This sounds ridiculous, but I wouldn't see any authority in the social echelons of the students that went to school, who were lovely, by the way, and I had no problems with at all. It's so strange to talk about your past without seeming like you're blaming people, because I'm not blaming people.
And actually, there isn't one thing that you've said that sounds like you're blaming people. You just sound very much that you're observing your own past, and actually how you felt and why you did certain things. Actually, to be honest, you haven't said anything that looks remotely like finger pointing.
Yeah, because there's everyone in school I would have time for, and if I met I hold no kind of ill feelings, and it's so. What's brilliant about being a teenager and looking back as an adult is that you put so much worth into social interactions, or what you see. That's why I'm loving watching the TV series Normal People at the moment, because they're spending 2 or 3 episodes talking about why someone didn't bring someone to the Debs, when in actuality that's such a tiny part of your life that you don't care about when you're older, but it affects you deeply at that point. And so it's kind of great to give yourself space, analyze you as a teenager, because then it helps you when you're an adult kind of try figure out how to be different in different situations.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating, and it's come up a few times when I've talked to people about how we take some particular moment in our life and let it define us for way too long. And it's usually something from our childhood or our teens when we're actually only learning how to be us. And it just sounds like me that you just, you wear the clever clogs. That might be closer to who you actually sort of identify with now, but that you needed to try something else on. But I think the problem probably arises when you try it on and then you feel you have to stick with it. Otherwise, maybe I don't know what the otherwise might be, but whereas, and maybe it was because you stayed in that school for all of secondary school, whereas you'd spent your life, which is not easy as a child, moving from one place to another. But then maybe had you moved on to a different secondary school, you might have reverted to a different way. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's what it was, and then it's what you learned from that. And I think there's way too much emphasis on school and what we achieved in school and, academia. Like, I'm actually thinking all these arguments at the moment about the Leaving Cert and whether it should go ahead, in the midst of the COVID crisis. And I'm kind of going, just forget about it for this year. Let's do something, an entrance exam for the university or something. But like, this is a crazy world. This, all bets are off. And no, actually, Leaving Cert points don't really matter. And in fact, they were only introduced a few years ago, relatively speaking. And sort of at my age, when you left school, actually the points system, I think, was introduced when I left school. But you also had the opportunity. What used to happen before was you just actually sat an exam to get into university. And all you had to do was pass that, was called the matric. And you just had to pass that exam. And there was no passing, that the highest people got in to study medicine and the lowest people got stuck with the course they didn't want. You just went in and you tried out a few things and you decided which course appealed to you. And really what weeded people out was whether you failed exams or not. And I actually think that's a far better way, because I think we exclude far too many people from university who are perfectly capable of, being brilliant at a particular, subject and topic, and they're excluded either A, because they didn't get enough points, and probably the reason they didn't get enough points is they were forced to do subjects that they're no good at. So it could be someone who's brilliant at language forced to do maths and science, and then their points come down. It's a screwed up system. How did I get onto that anyway?
No, it's good. I think also there's an element of class as well, because I'm from like a single parent background, and my mom couldn't afford grinds, and or going to the Gael doctor or stuff like that. And I saw the pursuit of academia because I was in the higher class and they're all brilliant, but like there was never going to be an option of me going up to UCD to do like 2 weeks and there probably could have been if I researched it more or whatever. I'd love to see what's that place called, the Institute in Dublin?
Oh yeah. The Institute on
their factory. That's a factory for people to do, and it's a good resource. And if you're able to afford it, go for it and everything. But that is a nitro boost to get your if you have a kid and you want to send them there, you will, and if I did, I would as well. Like you'd want your kid to have the best opportunities. I
actually sent my eldest in to the Institute for his final year, for sixth year. And actually the reason we sent him, and we really did have to scrape the money together to do it, was we felt, so this wasn't about any sort of snobbery and getting tons of points. Actually, from our perspective, my eldest has a learning disability, and just the regular school was failing him. It just, wasn't making the kind of accommodations that he needed. They were forcing him to take down notes in class just like everybody else, and taking notes of something off the blackboard and writing it down was just exhausting for him. And like, I went into the school and I said, look, you're obviously calling it off notes. Can you just give me the photocopies of those notes? And so Darren doesn't have to take it down in the class and he can just focus on, taking the information in instead of exhausting him in an act that really is just replicating, And she said, oh, if I did that for him, I'd have to do it for everybody. So actually for us, the Institute worked out amazingly, because that's exactly what they did. They gave you all your notes up front. You were expected to have read them. It was more like university. You were expected to have read them before you went into class. So then class was about discussing what was in those notes. And that worked really well for my son. And he was able to, he was given very clear, it was very, very exam focused. It was, here's what you need to do to get your grades. And to be honest, we were playing a system. Like, he wanted to go to university, but he was never going to get there because of the system. So we just felt, the system is flawed. So we have to find the way to play the system so that you can do what you need to do. And so that's the way we did that.
I'm very privileged to have gone to the school that I went to, because my school had a really good mental health department. And I was in weekly counselling since about 13 up until I was 19. So 6 years. I got free mental health help for and like intense mental health help, and really, really good teachers. Really, like, it's about 3 different teachers I remember that kind of would keep an eye on me. So like, they were brilliant, and I was so lucky to have gone to that school. It's not like I'm going rich people or anything like that. It's just circumstance, isn't it? Like, life is so.
It is. And I feel so sorry for, like, also like that. I've always had an interest in how humans work, and we sort of knew in some way, by the time Darren was about 9, that things weren't working properly in his brain, not properly. They were working differently. Let's put it that way, And I mean, I remember going down to the school and saying it. And actually what the teacher said to me was, Darren was doing, he was performing at an average level. He wasn't underperforming, but that there was still, I just knew there was something amiss, And that's pretty much what the teacher said to me. Oh, Mrs. Brennan, we can't all have geniuses. You just have to accept that Darren is average and that's it. Like, no, this is not what this is about. But ultimately, again, then it was through me, us pushing. And then eventually, and again, you have to pay for this. We had to pay to have an educational psychologist assess him. And he had, quite a severe learning difficulty. It was incredible what he'd managed, with that. But he found that a huge relief, because he said, oh, at least I'm not stupid.
Oh, yeah.
And, just even some of the simplest things are a huge challenge. And I think our education system fails to acknowledge that. And I do think as well, there's a certain problem and I think it's particular in Irish society, we're thinking that privilege equates with, God, you have everything okay. But, yes, there's privilege in having, maybe living in a middle class estate, or, having, income coming in or whatever. But that doesn't offer you any buffer of protection against other things in life, like mental health issues or, general health issues or whatever. But I think the systems fail that. I think it's fantastic to hear that, and I think things have moved on, that you, for whatever reason, needed counselling and support, and that it was there for you, irrespective of who your family were, because I just think of all the other people like my son who didn't have families who could see it or understood. And I mean, that's actually what scared me. I was reading articles, I was trying to understand. And I remember reading an article, and basically, it's funny, we both just said it here, like, our prisons, 75% of our prisoners have either mental health issues or learning disabilities. So that's a societal flaw, that if society, if we could help manage those people better, younger, it's in really, really early stages that we need to help people before they actually kind of get into trouble. But speaking of that, is that something that you speak openly about? The issues that you had when you were a teenager.
I've never thought about it as a thing to keep secret, because I'd have to leave double German. And my friends would be like, where were you? And I was like, oh, I was just, at such and such. It just wasn't, and they just accepted it, and it was fine. So I've never felt kind of stigma about having mental health issues, because I had treatment for it so young.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen later. It's great to see. I have younger relatives, and the way they speak openly about some stuff that I wouldn't have spoken openly about, it just makes life so much simpler and lovely. And to know, oh, this is why this person is angry today or whatever. It just, communication is just the lubrication of life. It just makes life so much easier.
That's a great way to say it. It just shows you how much, like, that's what I feel, so much change has happened just, of course, across the course of my lifespan. So I grew up in a family with mental health problems, issues, illness, whatever. You know, my father was suicidal when I was a teenager. And everybody was just ignoring it. And I happened to be going out when I was 15. My boyfriend at the time, his father was a psychiatrist. And it actually literally came like that. I just said to him, you know, can you come and help? You know, because literally my father went to bed for 9 months and all he talked about was killing himself. And I mean, then for the rest of his life, you know, he had a diagnosis back then. It was called manic depression, whereas now I think we use the term bipolar, but he was much more, thankfully he didn't have mania, like, and I've come across lots of people and I know people who have you know, extremes. For me mainly, I often even wonder whether the diagnosis was right, but he certainly had, you know, deep depression. But as kids we weren't allowed to tell anybody that my father was ill. We weren't allowed to say anything about that. And even as adults, and actually even really right up, you know, till kind of my dad passed away, my mum still had that's not something that should be discussed. And it's so sad really, because my dad had medication and actually, to be honest, he would have benefited hugely from talking therapy, but he never had talking therapy, never had counselling or of any, never had CBT. You know, he was such a clever man, you know, really clever. And often I think that was part of the problem, is that he wasn't challenged. You know, his life wasn't, you know, matching his you know, the level of stimulation that he needed. And he possibly and probably had too much time to ruminate and think, and would eventually, you know, go down this really right down sort of to the bottom. But he was very cyclical too, you know, so we would kind of have good weeks and then, you know, 6 or 7 weeks where he'd be down. But it's very sad because it's very unnecessary. But I just take great joy when I hear things like that, you know, you could talk and that it's even got better, you know, that people can just talk openly. Way better. And it's that whole thing of shame. It's just, life is so much simpler if you're truthful about stuff. I have a friend who has autism, and they are just very passable. So it's difficult for people to understand why they just think they're being rude. And I treat them with so much more empathy now that I know their diagnosis. Yes.
And, you know, there's no rows. Yeah, you're just like, oh, cool. Okay, that's because of that. You know, your brain doesn't even go, oh, does that person have a problem with me? Because you know they don't.
Yeah, you just go, well, actually, no, it's their social skills. They can't quite kind of play the nuances and are much more literal. And I mean, you know, socially interactive. I mean, there's so many rules, you know, like it's tough to know, you know, what you say. As you said, like you kind of said that earlier when you were talking about, you know, as an adult looking back, you know, learning from, you know, your teenage years and deciding who you need to be or who you want to be in certain contexts, you know, and that's true. You know, you can be true to yourself, but you also, to survive in the world, you have to be adaptable and you know, slightly adjust who you are in different circumstances. Would you kind of agree with that?
Well, all the time, because you know yourself, like you go on the radio, and so the cadences will change for me, and also I will not swear, or you know, or give my actual proper opinion on stuff, because I don't want to be kept to it, and because it will change, you know.
You see, I love that. That's. I was just saying this the other day, right? Sometimes I have to interview people, you know, if there's, you know, for a work in Trinity, if we were, you know, interviewing people for jobs, and I would always have lists of questions. So to make it fair, the same questions for everybody. But I would have questions, related to their work and their qualifications, et cetera, et cetera. But then I would also have a few questions I throw in, from a psychological perspective. And for me, actually, they're probably the more important ones, because I kind of think you can train and teach people to do stuff, but sort of, something inherent about them it says more about your ability to work together, or, whether you'd have similar kind of work ethics or goals. But one of the questions I would always ask people is, tell me a time when you were convinced to change a long-held belief that you had.
Yeah.
Right. And you'll be, it's a tough question to get in an interview room, but to me, I think actually it was the most telling question always for me, because it would flummox people. They'd kind of stop first and they'd think, and I say, take all the time in the world, just think and tell me. But the amount of people who would actually come back with the answer of, nope, I've never been convinced to change I'm very strong and, about what I believe. And I kind of just went, okay, can't work with you, because life is about getting new information and taking it in, and that can involve changing your opinions, your beliefs, because otherwise you're not updating. You're just, I don't know what the word you would call it, but it's vital to be able to know yourself well enough that if you get more knowledge and information, you may change your opinion.
Yeah, I think that comes from having very strong views as a teenager and child. I was very Catholic when I was younger, and everything that went with that. And then, it's mad. Like, I think my opinions change most when I meet people that have like probably, I'm trying to think. Do you know what? I remember there was a guy on a horse, and he was an American evangelical Christian, and he was going around Ireland for some reason, like on the horse, to spread the word of God. And I had it. I think it happened when I was in secondary school years ago, so it must be like 15 years ago. Okay. And he was on the radio and stuff, and I heard him and I was like, oh wow. And he came through Moat, and I have a gay friend that I went to secondary school with, and it's not, I never heard the evangelical Christian's opinion on homosexuality, but something inside me was like, ask him what he thinks. And then the guy was like, being just it doesn't matter, like, you're having a conversation with school children, so it's just like, yeah, I have my beliefs or whatever, and no, just a part of me was, I don't know if I had any changing opinions or anything like that, but you're a teenager and you're like, oh, I have a different opinion to this person. They're an adult, they're on a horse. He was on a horse, and I think I was asking him what his views on homosexuality was. And I don't know, I was very into debating when I was younger. I just liked it as I had a great teacher, Jerry Hipwell. He was a priest. He died actually when we were in secondary school, and he ran the debating club. And I remember like once, because I moved down a class because I wanted to be with my mates.
Really? Gosh.
Oh yeah, I did big time. And the teachers were like, "Please don't," and I was like, "I'm going to." So I did just every wrong decision that could be possibly made in secondary school. I did it. Like, I just did not, And he was in his class, and I said something with the word diabolical in it, and he was like, "How do you know that word?" And I was like 13 or something, and I was like, "I don't know." And he was lovely to me. He was such a lovely, encouraging, great teacher. I don't know why I'm talking so much about secondary school, but he ran the debating club. I love debating club. Debating club was my favorite thing, and when he died, it kind of like went with him for a little while, So it was very he was a great guy there.
I'm really interested in how you became a comedian. Like, is it something that you always wanted to do, like from inside, the journey inside yourself?
Stand-up comedy was not part of my life when I was a teenager. I think I saw Eddie Murphy Raw on DVD once, and maybe a Tommy Tiernan DVD at a house party, but not with the sound on. So it wasn't a thing that I had a knowledge of or was a part of my life, because I grew up in rural Westmeath. And I went to college in Ballyfermot. I wanted to be a radio DJ when I was younger.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because I used to text into the Ricochet show on 2FM. And once a producer rang me and said, would you like to come on and talk about whatever you were texting in about? And I was like, yeah. So I did, and I had a great time on it. And then they said, would you like to come back next week and review films? So I used to, I used to skip double German on a Wednesday and do reviews for Ricochet. I used to use the phone in the girls' bathroom and just talk about the films I'd seen that week. And I loved it. And I went to college then and studied radio, and I did some work experience in a radio station called iRadio. And Bernard O'Shea he's a stand-up comedian, and he was the breakfast DJ. He said, doing a gig with PJ Gallagher, I'd no interest in doing stand-up comedy after. It was just an opportunity to meet PJ Gallagher, because I thought, oh, this is cool, because he's on Naked Camera. I did the gig, and I just had this big rush of adrenaline before, where I was like, oh, this could go badly, and then a big rush of adrenaline after, because it didn't go badly. And I've probably never felt the same ever since. Like, I've never walked off a stage and felt the way I did the first gig I did, but I keep doing it.
You're always searching for that again. Like, great.
It's a big addiction. Like, I'm very sad that I'm not able to do stand-up comedy for the near future because of the COVID problem. So it is a big thing kind of missing in my life, kind of having that addiction to adrenaline. You know, some people go jumping out of a plane to do it, and I go on stage.
I totally get that. I mean, I used to be an actor, and I don't know that I quite feel it's an addiction, but I did end up, I'm a very late starter. I mean, I did all my exams and I trained as a drama teacher and all that sort of stuff, but I didn't actually really become a working actor till I was in my 30s. I think I was 32. Right. And I was an actor for 10 years, and I loved it. Like, I loved it. I would never, but still always have that, you know, the nervousness beforehand. And but I loved working in soap. But that role ended, and then sort of Ireland, as you know, is sort of a small place, and you know, there isn't a huge amount of work for women. Plus, I was late starting, which means I wasn't part of, you know, the cliques and the crews. And, you know, Ireland can be quite like that. Certainly sort of in the acting sector, it was a bit. And I had two small boys, so I couldn't just kind of go off to London and do whatever. And I ended up then going to university and sort of changing. But I still perform now, like it's become different. So I give talks. What I'm missing with COVID, so all of my gigs have been cancelled as well, and I've done a few online, but it's not the same. It's not the standing up and performing. I'm missing the audience. I love seeing their face. I love when they smile or laugh at something I said. I love when they register a piece of information. That's what happens in my brain when I do that, and I'm missing that feedback. I mean, is that what you get from your audience too? Like,
yeah, I do, and it depends on the different types of audience. It's kind of when I first did stand-up comedy, I was doing it to clubs a lot, so you just wanted to be as funny as possible to as many people as possible, and then you develop your own kind of opinions and style, and you know, people maybe appreciate that more. Less people will appreciate it more, then more people appreciate it a small bit, you know? Mm-hmm. So I think probably the best gigs I have are to an audience that has specifically come to see me. But when an audience hasn't specifically come to see me, it's a different thing, and it's a great challenge, and it feels good. And I put a lot of my self-worth, which I shouldn't do, into stand-up comedy, which is a thing that I should definitely stop doing because it's not healthy. So, you know, that's the kind of thing is the relationship with the audience is important. And sometimes podcasting can kind of scratch that itch in a way. And yeah, it's strange. It's
interesting that you said that, because I kind of just jotted down a few things. I like to kind of let the conversations flow, but it's nice to have a few things that you want to talk about. And actually, it's funny that you just said that there about you put a lot of your self-worth in your comedy, because one of the things I wanted to ask you was actually about that. Like, you're very popular. Lots of people really, really, like you and like your performance. And I'm always interested in that, is that what is it you think that they like? And do you feel obliged to provide that? Or do you feel that you can just be you? And if they like you, they like you.
It's strange because, especially with being inside now, and I think it's the same way with people's relationship with social media. Sometimes you get rewarded for honesty, and you're being honest at it and being emotionally vulnerable because you feel that way, but you get rewarded for that. So it feels strange then to do it again, because you're like, am I doing this because I want to, or is this expected of me? It's strange when I get complimented off people where they talk about, oh, you talk about your mental health so openly. And it's not a decision I made where I was like, I'm going to talk about it openly because either people need to hear about it or it's something that people will like. It's just, I have observations on mental health as much as I do about crisps or whatever, observational comedians talk about. And also I'm very self-involved, so I can't do anything other than that. So so it's a kind of conversation I have with myself all the time. The annoying thing about going through professional help for so long is that you're constantly analysing your feelings.
Yeah.
My answer to you would probably change every day, but I try not to think about it that much because you just have to let things happen, do you know?
I'm kind of in agreement with you too. I think there's huge value in self-awareness. I think, I think that really is helpful, but you can't be self-aware all the time because then you're not living in the moment. And I think you just gotta live in the moment and enjoy it. And I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with you feeling that you found something, because that's what I think about happiness really is. It's about finding something that you love doing and other people want in a way. Do you know? And something that you're good at. And I mean, that they're sort of the principles of around how I live my life. And it actually, it's that, and I have said this a few times, people are probably fed up hearing it, but it's like a Japanese concept. It's about finding something that you love, something that you're good at, something that the world needs. And then the fourth element is, and finding a way to get paid for it. Now, that's what I struggle with. And I loved one of the quotes, I think you actually said this, is Alison Spittle does stand-up comedy all the time because there's no money in it.
That's the funny thing about doing my job. When people think if you go on TV that automatically means money, and I'm just a person that's not good with savings and with money, and also because I'm doing a job I love as well, I feel sometimes that it's so strange. I just have this feeling all the time that I have a nice life that I'm happy with, therefore I don't deserve to be paid well.
Yeah, do you think part of that is because we're women? Number one, I don't know that if that's the case, but I just think it goes across all the arts, like certainly as an actor, and certainly as an actor starting out, you are expected to work for nothing, but also if you give talks, the amount of people who expect you to just come and give talks for nothing. And you kind of go, I'd love to do that, but hey, I actually have to pay my mortgage and I have to buy food in the supermarket. And, but I hear it from authors, and my own son, my youngest son is a musician. And, that's kind of the same. Yeah, there's a few people, like that, high-end comedians or, multi-million selling authors and, number one musicians or whatever that make an absolute fortune. But most jobbing artists struggle to make ends meet. And particularly during COVID now, I presume you had all your gigs cancelled.
Yeah, I was supposed to go on tour. March was going to be the month where I made my money for the rest of the year. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know. I understand. I used to be an actor, and people thought that, I was on Fair City and people thought we were paid loads of money. We weren't. But also what people couldn't understand was, you might get booked for 6 weeks. You're not on a retainer. You earn nothing then, for the next 10 or 12 weeks. And an awful lot of actors that I worked with, they would be in collecting their dole in between, because you don't get paid a huge amount of money, and you also don't know if you're going to work next year. And so you might get one really, really good gig, as I'm sure it works for you, and you've got to make it last till the next really, really good gig.
That's exactly it. And I do this thing called co-video parties now, so I'm very...
that's something that I do want to talk to you about.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. Like, someone messaged me maybe the second day that I was doing it and said, do you have a Patreon or a coffee account that I can give money to you for doing the co-video party? And I was like, no, I don't, but you know what, I will. And so I have a coffee account, and then I got sponsored by Flips, which are like a chocolate covered pretzel company. I'm not advertising it now, but I've just been, this is what's happening in my life. But they sponsored the Fridays of co-video party. So I've been able to pay my rent throughout this, and I'm just so thankful that, I think, because I didn't grow up with money, so I constantly saw people with stress over money. Like most of the arguments I would see, or most of the roadblocks would be, but I don't have the money to do that. But I don't have the time because I have to work, or, that type of thing. Yeah. So in my life, I never wanted to be in debt to anyone. I never wanted to get a loan. Also, I used to see loan companies in my estate, and they were...
Oh, no.
Yeah, I did. I grew up with a kind of a very big attitude of I never ever want to owe anyone money. Like, that's just it would hurt me. It would physically hurt my mind, I think, to owe someone money. So I don't know how I'm going to get a house, but
that is very different, because I would have been brought up like that as well. Actually, you don't buy something until you can afford it. And a lot of people used to do that sort of thing. And I grew up in a nice neighborhood, but it was only my father worked, and there were 7 of us. So, there wasn't loads of money, and I got my shoes from pennies, or from dogs, whereas yes, I grew up in a nice neighborhood. Yes, actually, I grew up and still live in Clontarf, and as far as I'm aware, there's no dogging going on the beach.
No, not with COVID.
Sorry for people listening. You have to check out an episode of Alison's podcast, which was with Maureen O'Connell, who I absolutely love. And between the pair of them, they were trying to decide where dogging may occur. Yeah, you decided anyway that it was on in Clontarf on the beach. But anyway, yes, I have no knowledge either way, whether it does or it doesn't. But it just popped into my head. Again, you see, the connections are all about places between you and me. But this COVID party thing, it's fantastic. Do you want to just explain what it is? Because, maybe people listening haven't a notion, and who knows how long we'll be in lockdown. You might get more people tuning in and dropping a few bob into your coffee cup.
Yeah, and this is it. They don't have to at all. I started co-video party the day after all of my gigs got cancelled, because I realised how far into this we were going to go, because all the gigs throughout the year were getting cancelled. So I was like, this is not going to be 3 weeks. And I felt so sad that one of my favourite activities to do is go to the cinema with people and kind of talk about the film after it. And I just realised that wasn't going to happen for a long time. So I said to my friends on Twitter, does anybody want to watch a film at the same time, and we can tweet about it using the hashtag co-video party? Mm-hmm. And I'm very bad at making decisions, so I got people to choose the film with a poll, and we watched Clueless together, and it was just brilliant crack. And more people started getting involved, and then someone said, do you want to do it tomorrow at the same time? I was like, yeah, why not? Sure, I'm doing nothing else. And I've also put a lot of effort into it. I would do costumes, and also I'm just doing it every day because people have given me feedback and said I like it. And the thing about it is Netflix is a finite resource. So we are circling the drain for films at the moment, but it's the communal aspect, and as well as that, what's great is within the first weeks, loads of people are involved, and I see the same people coming back, leaving for a week, coming back. And it's great for what I get from it is the interaction of when I do, for instance, podcasts or Zoom chats with friends. I'm talking a lot. I'm trying to check in emotionally with the people I'm talking to, trying to give them as much information about my week. Also, like, making sure my face is a happy face, or, you know, your whole interaction is kind of under a microscope because you're there being there for your friend and checking in.
That's the thing about Zoom. You can see your own face. So there's kind of, you're sort of resetting yourself every so often, as you just said, you know, oh, make sure you smile. Oh, you look a bit cross there. Smile.
Yeah, look like you're listening hard. And, you know, if there were 6 people at a table, you'd zone out. Your face would zone out. You'd be listening, but you wouldn't be concentrating on making your face seem like you're listening. But if I'm in a Zoom meeting with 6 people, I am just with the finger on the chin going, yes, good point. And like, I've nothing to contribute to this conversation, but I'm going to look like I'm listening. And with the co-video, where it's just tweeting about Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's getting that element. It's not feeling as lonely, but also it's not like a family Zoom call or a catching up with friends Zoom call. It's the interaction you'd get if you're in a queue and you just had a little chat.
I think it's a fab idea. I can see exactly, you know, the appeal of it is. There's so many people. I mean, do you live alone, Alison?
Well, so what happened was I live with people. One of them got COVID, so everyone had to self-isolate for weeks. Right. So I kind of went for a few weeks not touching anybody or talking to people, or, you know, so that was hard, and it was good to have that element of talking to people. And also it was good to not just constantly talk about the person that was sick in the house with me. Like, whenever relatives were talking to me, it was like, how are they? What's going on? That type of thing.
And I mean, I've said that the value of laughter, it's actually increased even, you know, and increases during times like this. You know, there's so many awful things happening. You know, nature has given us a stress buster, and that stress buster is laughter. When you laugh, your cortisol levels actually reduce, you know, and it's just critical that we do it. It's critical that we do silly, mundane, you know, stupid things, because we're so bombarded and because the news is so dreadfully depressing. I mean, I just had to stop myself. I can't listen. And I mean, actually, I'm not watching any television or any movies. I just feel that with my own mental health at the moment, pretty much most movies will have some sad part or, you know, something that emotionally. And I just know myself well enough to know that now is not a good time for me to watch movies that may have sort of sadness in them. I had started to watch This Is Us, which is an amazing drama series. I started to watch it, thought it was incredible, but then realised it was starting to get sad. And so actually I've just put it aside. I will come back to it at another time. But I just know that, you know, with all the deaths and what's going on with COVID and all those changes, that would just be adding sort of fuel into the mix. So that's what I do. I think we've just got to do whatever we need to do, because mental health issues are not going away just because we're in COVID. And in fact, some of them are going to get worse. And so something like you've done is amazing. You know, you might just say that it's a bit of crack and, you know, just that chat in the queue, but that can be the lifesaver for somebody. You know, it really can. And I think we kind of need more of those kind of things. And I think we just, as a society, it's really crazy, the things that we value, the people that we pay huge amounts of money to. And the people who actually, you know, the arts is a big area that gives people joy and gives meaning to their life, whether it's movies, whether it's comedy, whether it's books, whatever it is. You know, just imagine COVID-19 without any of the arts. We'd all be slitting our wrists because there'd be nothing to do. And yet, you know, the majority of people working in the arts receive little or no income. And I think we should actively be trying to change that. The arts are essential. They're not like fluff on top. If you just even look at how humans evolved, you know, we started storytelling, and that's, you know, comedy is storytelling with fun, you know, laughter added in, you know, and we were painting on the walls of caves going kind of way back. And I just just think we value loads of the wrong things.
Yeah, we should. The other part is also people that are delivery people, people who work in shops, who are bin people. Our society wouldn't work at all. I've been getting, cards and stuff from family. I've been sending over gifts, especially to my older relatives, because it's hard if they don't know how to use WhatsApp.
Yes.
Or they don't have access to WhatsApp if they don't have a smartphone with the.
I've been trying to get. I was talking to Alone the other day and just saying, is there any way we could set up even a pen pal service? It would make such a difference.
Massive
if we could just write letters to older people, even that we don't know, but just for them to, even if a letter popped on their door every day, that would just help. And if they then had somebody to write back to, that would help. There's so many kind of vulnerable people, and dying is only one of those vulnerabilities. Loneliness can kill you as well, and we just have to kind of find the balance on that. I really enjoyed your podcast chat with Deborah Francis, and actually you've worked with her a good bit in The Guilty Feminist.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's an amazing,
absolutely amazing, and I love The Guilty Feminist. It's just fab. You contribute to that quite a bit now, don't you?
Yeah, I'm very lucky. I mean, Deborah lives in the same part of London as me, and when I moved here, she did like a little dinner party with people that lived here and just said, "This is Alison, she's your new friend now."
God.
And she didn't have to.
Oh, that's so nice.
That's the thing about her, is that like she just goes above and beyond. She's just a very thoughtful person, and I'm lucky to have her as a friend. Being with The Guilty Feminist has helped me loads.
Yeah, and I just looked at, like, I think she said in your podcast, I was just so jealous. She had 17 million downloads of The Guilty Feminist podcast in the first 18 months.
Yeah.
But the reason I brought her up, aside from the fact that she's just amazing and brilliant, she said something that speaks to me immensely, and something... And it is that she said, I think it's something like, I can always tell when someone knows they're going to die. And what she meant by that is, someone is aware of the fact that we only have a certain amount of time on this planet. And I live my life like that now as I've got older. I mean, I'm 57 now. So I know, and for the last few years, I've known that I've lived more than I have left to live.
Yes.
And I have found that to be the most inspiring way I have ever thought about my life. Now, I've said it to my husband, and he went around depressed for about 4 days, and I kept saying, what is wrong with you? And he said, you just fucking told me I've lived more than I've left to live, but I can't cope. Whereas for me, it actually became this, fuck it, get your ass in gear. Yes, you've done loads of things, but there's so much more you want to do. And it also helped me immensely just cull the unnecessary stuff in my life. Like I realized that there was an awful lot of what I was doing was essentially because I was Irish and because the way I was brought up, never to say no. And so I was doing an awful lot of shit that didn't mean anything to me. So now I try to just do the stuff that I love. I still struggle. I still say yes to things. I still find it hard to ask to be paid to do things. That's all still there. But at least I kind of am focusing on stuff I like. What I'm loving about the podcast is just getting to have these conversations with such interesting and inspiring people like yourself. It's fab. Do you I think your response at that time was that you, because of your Catholic upbringing, I thought it was really, really interesting. I think you said that you had sort of from Catholicism a sense of forgiveness and a sense that, if you say sorry, everything will be all right, and that you're less aware of your mortality. So she was talking about being aware of mortality, and you were kind of saying, well, no, I'm not really, because I don't live the healthiest of lives. And I just think everything will be okay. But I think maybe that was just a kind of quip, a humorous response.
No, I'm also, I have a weird relationship with death. I had no one close to me that died when I was a child until I was about 11. When I was born, I had nearly a full set of great-grandparents. So I was just used to people living for a very long time. and it seemed like death was a thing that would be very far away, and something I didn't want to think about, also because I was afraid of hell, the concept of hell, and was convinced I was going to go to hell. So I just didn't think about it at all. And then, when you're a teenager, you get older, people close to you die. Also, probably the person I was most close to that died in a way that wasn't sudden was a big atheist, like the biggest atheist I knew. So my grandma was dying, and she was very not into the concept of an afterlife, and my Irish side of my family would just throw holy water at a problem. Would go, look, it's fine, they're with the angels now, that type of thing,
Right,
and
yeah.
that was definitely a thing.
I like that. Throw holy water at the problem. I like that.
Yeah, that was a thing. So to have someone so calm and so not resigned. I mean, she was scared and everything, but she had a real dignity in her, and we would talk openly about stuff. And just, I secretly in the back of my mind didn't think she was going to die. So when she asked me to do her eulogy, I was like, yeah, I'll do your eulogy. But I like homework, I didn't do it until she had passed. So. That's a regret, I'd say.
But what an honour, Alison, that it's you she wanted to do her eulogy. That's lovely.
Yeah, it was my first stand-up gig, wasn't it? So,
did you get them laughing? I think it's good if you did.
I did, and also she was probably behind. I was very lucky to be brought up in a family on both sides that were just very encouraging and saw a lot of potential in me. She was a person who just tried to get me into Mensa when I was a kid, and she was very into the idea of me being academic, and I was just pissing away that. And once again, she never said she was disappointed in me, never, So I'm an incredibly lucky person. She died when I was 19, and I wish she a couple of more years where I did well at stand-up, that she could see that.
I get that, but I think there's nothing we can do about that. I mean,
No.
I kind of feel the same with my dad. I was the first person ever in either families to go to university, and they had to wait a long time. As I said, I was 42. I got a scholarship to do my PhD in Trinity, and my dad was just over the moon. But alas, he died a year into my PhD, so he never got to.
He saw where you were going, so that's good. He
saw where I was going, but would you believe, the irony how things happen? But it transpired that I graduated with my PhD on the anniversary of my father's death. I just sort of took that as a something. We need those connections, don't we? They kind of give us comfort. I don't know what it is. I mean, it's not just we need the social connection, and that's why this is challenging so many people, what we're living through at the moment. We need that social connection to survive and to feel well. But we also need to find other connections. Each time I go to interview a guest, if you've never met them before or you don't know them very well, kind of, gosh, how is this going to work out, and what will we talk about, and will we have a conversation? So my instinct is always to look for some sort of connection, which is exactly what I did here. It's not something that I consciously do. It just happens. My brain, it's like you with your songs. You can't help but make that connection. We've been talking for absolutely ages. This is just fantastic. I've loved every single minute of it. You've actually surprised me in some ways. It's lovely when you've never, really had that sort of conversation with someone. It's been fascinating, and I could probably talk to you forever. There's one thing that I like to do at the end, and that is just to ask my guests if there is any piece of advice, any sort of mantra they have, anything that they, would just like to share with listeners. The podcast sort of tagline is that I interview interesting and inspiring people about thriving and surviving in life. I suppose anything on those themes, well, whether you feel, you're thriving, but sometimes I'm sure, like all of us, you feel like you're just surviving. But if there's any sort of tips or anything that you would like to share about surviving life, or even very specifically about surviving through COVID, or how you have come to thrive in life.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me personally is that a big part of my identity was making sure that people liked me. I would change myself to make people like me. I would do stuff to be a people pleaser. And because my biggest fear was people not liking me. But being a stand-up comedian, lots of people don't like me, and that's cool, and it feels it's so strange that when you have a fear of that, you avoid it for so long, and then when it actually happens and you can't control it, it's actually fine. Yeah, I suppose like every kind of like milestone I've been afraid, because like when I went on the Late Late Show, it's like delighted to be on the Late Late Show. It's like, oh, this is cool. My grandparents will be so proud of me. This is a way to show that like they don't have to worry about me. Because the weird thing about being a comedian is like all the time my poor grandparents and stuff are like, are you okay for money? Are you okay? Because we'll help you, you know. But I remember feeling weird about it, and I was like, why do I feel like a sense of foreboding? And I was like, oh, it's because it's safe when you're doing stand-up in like a 60-seater room. You don't get to hear people. You just hear the laughter. You don't get to see or hear people that don't like you. And it could just be one or two. But when you're in front of like thousands, that's going to add up, you know? So I think it's like the power to know not to stress. So I don't have the power to make people like me.
Yes.
And I thought I did. And I would do everything I could to kind of prevent people not liking me.
I would imagine a lot of people just, do want to be liked, but I think that's just such an astute comment. The most important thing is actually to like yourself.
Yes.
That's harder to do than it sounds. But instead of working really hard to get other people to like you, actually all that matters is liking yourself. And then you can't go wrong, because you won't do stuff that's not going to sit good with you. Do you know what I mean? Because you won't like yourself. Whereas if you're trying to please other people and get them to like you, you might actually do stuff that you don't feel comfortable about.
Yeah. Also, like, there's times where I haven't liked people, or I've been like willfully not aggressive. It's a weird, where sometimes maybe there's someone new in your circle and you kind of have a stead refusal to like them. And I'm like, why am I feeling that way? Oh, because they remind me too much of me, or I associate that personality with that time of my life, or whatever. So when people, it's funny, because I probably get like the most negative attention about my weight, and like when I go on telly, they'll be like, some people will treat me and go, oh, it's very bad that you're on television, you're glorifying obesity. And I'm like, well, number one, glorifying, thank you. They have those feelings because it's not because of me, it's because of something else in their life. Maybe they're worried about a relative, maybe they hate their own body. There's something in it, and I feel it's weird to go, I feel bad for them. I don't feel, number one, no matter what kind of way you're feeling about yourself, you should just not make other people feel bad. And there's kind of, in my head, there's like, I'm kind of sick of empathizing with people, because I've been brought up my whole life to do it. And sometimes I'm like, I wish I didn't know why you're like this. I wish I could just call you a prick, Yeah. So yeah, I think it's been a big weight off me.
Gosh, some of the stuff, you really just wonder about people, what is going on in their lives that they have to be so nasty to other people. And what does it matter to you what somebody else is doing that's causing you no harm?
Yes, and I think that's my biggest mantra, is like, whatever doesn't cause you or other people any harm doesn't concern you.
Brilliant. And that's a fantastic note, I think, to end on. I have loved every minute of this. Thank you so much, Alison Spittle.
I thoroughly enjoyed speaking to Alison. She is genuinely one of the nicest people you could meet. I love her honesty, and to be honest, I was absolutely blown away by her level of self-awareness and how well she knows herself, and how willing she is to take responsibility for her own choices and actions. To be honest, I think that is one of the keys to having a super brain, and I am so grateful to Alison for letting me take a peek inside hers. My name is Sabina Brennan, and you have been listening to Super Brain, the podcast for everyone with a brain. Tune in on Thursday for this week's Super Brain Booster Shot, and feel free to email me at info@sabinabrennan.ie to tell me how much you love the show, or follow me on Twitter at Sabina_Brennan, or on Instagram at Superbrain Podcast, or at Sabina Brennan. Subscribe on Acast, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. That's all from me. Till next time, stay safe.